Welcome, welcome, welcome. I see Samson, I see Marcia, I see Fikile. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can, loud and clear. Hello.
Hi, Marcia, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, I see Benoit as well. We're just going to give people a few minutes to join, so please be patient with us. We'll give people a few minutes to trickle in. Hi, everyone. We're just giving people one more minute to trickle in and then we'll get started. Please feel free to just write your name, organization, and where your organization is based in the chat, please. And if we're a small enough group, we might just do a quick round of intros. We'll see how many we are. Hi, Marlies. I'm glad you're here. Welcome.
Thanks, Maaza. My computer's on the blink, so I'm going to try do it on my cell phone if you can hear me clearly.
Yes, we can hear you clearly. Just give us 1 minute and then I'll give the order of events so people will know that you are coming up first. Thank you.
Perfect. It just means that you were my tasting bunny. So I'm all good. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. All right. Hi, everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me okay. I think we can get started. This is the monthly People's Vaccine Alliance Africa call. Thank you for being patient with us with the change of date. We had a recurring issue where we were clashing with the Global People's Vaccine Alliance meeting. So it's something that I would actually like to discuss at the end of switching this meeting to the final Tuesday of the month rather than the final Thursday of the month, so we can avoid that clash. I also really want to apologize for the spam that came through on the email. We are shifting all of our communications to MailChimp going forward, so we will avoid that. So I really apologize. I don't know if all of you received that one piece of spam response, so really, really sorry for that. We have a small group, and I think more people might be joining us because I believe, Viv, we had a few more registrations. But in the meantime, just because she has another appointment, I would like to start even before we go through with the agenda that I had in mind for the meeting. I really wanted to give the floor to Marlies Richter from Health Justice Initiative. She has agreed to fill in for Fatima Hassan today and to update us on the story, which I think you have all heard about, and I've received some questions about the story of the Johnson & Johnson vaccines being filled and finished in South Africa and being exported to the global north. So the Health Justice Initiative really took the lead in making sure that story hit the New York Times and then got coverage in a whole bunch of other newspapers. So I wanted to just give Marlies the floor for a few minutes, just for those of you who have not heard about this, to give us a sense of what the story was, and then also to answer any questions of clarification, any new news, Marlies, that has come up since the articles that we saw a few weeks ago, and then potential advocacy steps going forward. So, and I realized that I didn't introduce myself. My name is Maaza Seyoum. I'm with the African Alliance. I know many of you, but I do see some new faces or new names here. So it would be nice, maybe Marlies, once you finish up, because I know that you need to run off, we might do just a quick round of intros. So Marlies, over to you. And I know that your camera is broken, so don't worry, we'll take you incognito.
You're very sweet. Thanks, Maaza. Maaza, I'm really happy for people to introduce themselves first. I'm not in such a big hurry. So if for the order of events, it's better for people to first tell us who's in the room, please, let's do that first.
Okay, that might be good for you too, so you know who you are speaking with. Ntando, just because I know you well, I'm going to put you on the spot. Can we start with you? Just tell people who you are, which organization, and where your organization is based.
Thanks, Maaza. My name is Dando. Hello, everybody. Dando Yola. I'm based in Cape Town. My primary organization is the Desmond Tutu Health Foundation. Thank you.
Thanks, Ntando. Marcia, I don't think we have met.
No, we haven't. This is the first time I actually got an invite to attend your session. So I am bright-eyed and bushy-tailed and excited to be here. Thank you very much. I am part of the South African National AIDS Council Civil Society Forum, and I am based in Pretoria.
Excellent. Welcome, Marcia.
Thank you.
Samson, you are next on my list here.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. Maaza, nice to see you. This is Samson Orao. I am with Action AID International in Kenya, based in Nairobi. Nice to be here. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Samson. Fikile.
Good afternoon, colleagues. My name is File Moyo from the SANEX CSF Secretariat, along with Marcia. Nice meeting you all.
Nice to meet you as well. Robert.
Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. My name is Robert Tuanyunbo. I work with Christian Aid, based out of Nairobi, Kenya. Really great to be here. Cheers.
Welcome, Robert, and glad you're doing better. Last I heard about you, you had a small bicycle accident. Are you doing well?
Well, I basically have the use of one arm, so I make the most.
Oh, sorry. Well, thank you for joining us despite that, and I hope you feel better soon. Susan, welcome back. Susan is one of our most regulars. It's always so nice to see you. Welcome back, Susan.
Oh, thanks, Maaza. I find these sessions so useful to catch up on. So yeah, hi, everyone. It's Susan from Gender Links, based in Johannesburg.
Excellent. Flavia?
Hi everyone, my name is Flavia, Flavia Mongovia, representing Amnesty International. It's fine, Flavia, it's fine. Yeah, no problem at all. I have this invite standing on my calendar, but I never make it because it's always clashing with something else. There are always like 3 meetings side by side. So today it was the only one and I was super excited. So I was like, finally, I can just sit in and listen and learn because I've been not so plugged in. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you.
I'm so glad. Welcome. Let's see. And Buba, last but not least, Buba.
Thank you, Maaza. Good morning, everyone. Buba Khan from Action AID International. I'm based in the Gambia. Thank you.
And Vivian, actually, last but not least, Vivian.
Hi, everyone. My name's Vivian Naidu, and I'm with the African Alliance based in Johannesburg. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Marlies, for allowing us to do that. So then I'll hand over to you and you can update us on this Johnson & Johnson story.
Thanks so much, Maaza. Good afternoon, everyone. Those in South Africa, and I suspect it's afternoon for almost everyone. My name is Marlies Richter, and I'm a researcher at the Health Justice Initiative. And I was asked this afternoon just to give you a quick input on the developments around the Johnson & Johnson vaccines. And my colleague Fatima would have provided the update, but she was pulled into another appointment, and I said I would just give you a short synopsis of the developments in the last couple of weeks. And I think I will start off just with what happened on the 17th of August, because that's the key date where a New York Times article exposed what was components of the Johnson & Johnson contract with the South African government. And I think our entry point in this forum is the non-disclosure agreements that pharmaceutical companies have with many parties who are purchasing vaccines from them. And a key component around transparency is for these contracts to be made public. So this contract is not public, but the New York Times somehow got a copy of it, and they wrote an article that describes some of the components of the contract. The Health Justice Initiative has been asking for this contract for ages, and we have a Promotion of Access to Information Act. That's a legal mechanism in South Africa where you ask entities to provide access to information. We currently have a request for the contract with the Department of Health, and we're considering how to take it forward so that everyone can have access to the contract. So what basically was in this contract was that Johnson & Johnson vaccines are being filled and finished in South Africa, and they were exported to various European countries, basically in the lead up to the third wave in South Africa specifically, and millions of vaccines had been ordered for African continent, and Johnson & Johnson has only been able to supply 6 million of the 400 million that have been ordered by the African Union. And they said that they can only deliver up to 50 million of the promised 400 by the end of 2021. So while these promises have been made to the African continent, Johnson & Johnson exported vaccines from South Africa to European countries. And what the contract does is to compel the South African government to not restrict any of the exports from Johnson & Johnson with their separate agreement with us, Aspen Pharmacare. So the extreme inequality where we know that in Europe, they've got a vaccination rate of about 53%. In Africa, I don't need to state it in this forum, but it's less than 3%. Some of the vaccines leaving the continent's shores when we are in dire need of it is something that was exposed through this article. So there was a press conference on the day that the story broke, and there has now been more of a light on Johnson & Johnson and their promises and the lack of vaccine equality between the global north and the global south. So that's a little bit of background to the story from 2 weeks ago. And what's happened in the meantime, and I'm just going to spend 2 minutes on that, is that the exports are still continuing. And the European Union has said that it's a 60-40 arrangement, which means that they will only stop the export at the end of October, and they are more likely to still receive about 10 million by the end of October. And we in Africa haven't received our promised supplies, and that basically leads to a supply crisis for almost all countries in Africa, and I think that would probably hold for most countries in the global south. How that relates to some of the advocacy that all of us are probably involved in is that the African Union, AVAT, they're not transparent about anything around their contract and their supplies. So there are many things that we don't know, that as civil society, it's in our interest, it's in the interest of the public money that's involved around vaccines for these contracts to be made available. And that this contract and the provisions within it affects Africa considerably more, because we rely on Aspen and Johnson & Johnson for altogether probably about 220 million supplies. So it seems that the Aspen Africa contract is also vital for us to put together the puzzle pieces, and it's not unsurprising that Johnson & Johnson is not providing any comment, and they're not answering to anyone, and that's I think a characteristic that we've seen with pharmaceutical companies within vaccine access. So in terms of some of the actions that we can do is to apply pressure on Johnson & Johnson and the European Union, because the European Union can subsequently apply pressure on Johnson & Johnson to provide some of the details, as well as to correct the massive imbalance. And then, of course, the broader structural issues about the sharing of know-how. We know that there's a lot of capacity in low and middle income countries and funding to produce vaccines, but that the key components in making that a reality is the know-how and the knowledge, and that multiple licenses and technology transfer needs to happen. So I think some of the broader advocacy asks tie in very nicely to I think this case study and very important pressure point around vaccine equity. I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much, Marlies. I really appreciate it. And this is obviously, given the ridiculous vaccine apartheid that we're experiencing on the continent, the fact that there was so much hype about the fill and finish taking place in South Africa, and then to find out, thanks to some of the work of activists like yourselves at Health Justice Initiative, that the bulk of the vaccines being filled and finished at Aspen are actually being exported to Europe. The irony of that is so ridiculous. And there has been a lot of follow-up press. And for those of you who have not seen it, what I'll try and do, and I'll just put a note to myself to make sure that for those of you who haven't seen it, that we share the New York Times article. And then there were some other articles that came afterwards, both in African and US and European and Canadian press. And then the video of the press conference, Marlies, if people have the password, which I know that you had shared with me on Zoom, would they be able to access that if they wanted to see the press conference?
Maaza, I think so. And what I'll do is after this conversation, I'll put together some of those URLs and I'll send it to you for dissemination.
That would be super helpful. Thank you very much. So I thought, I know that we've heard a lot about the story, and I hope that it's useful for the people here to get it directly from, one of the groups that's been working quite a bit on the story and had actually asked for more transparency before this article broke. Does anybody have any questions for Marlies about this? questions of clarification or questions about how maybe we can collaborate to push going forward, which is something that I think the timing is very good, Marlies, because something that we will talk about is the fact that the People's Vaccine Alliance has a week of action planned in September. And one of the points of the week of action is the continued shaming of pharmaceutical companies. So we can talk about it a little bit there and think about whether a target of Johnson & Johnson would be useful. One question that I had, Marlies, is I saw an article that somebody had shared online, it might have been Fatima, that the Johnson & Johnson shareholders had actually released a statement saying that even they, as shareholders of Johnson & Johnson, were appalled by this story, because on the Johnson & Johnson website, they have all this lovely language about, you know, equality and access to health for all. And has anything come of that? Was that a real, I mean, do you think, Marlies, that there really was kind of horror among the shareholders of Johnson & Johnson? And has anything come of that? I know you said Johnson & Johnson is quiet, but was there any traction from the shareholder statement?
Maaza, that's a key point. I must admit that I've been on leave and I've only come back, and I wasn't actually even aware of this. This is very good to hear about the shareholders. What I'll do is I'll do some digging, and I will, in the email with the links, I will put some information on that. I don't have that answer right away.
Okay, thank you. All right, does anybody have questions for Marlies? We're such a small group. I think you can feel free to jump in if you have a question for her. Oh, and I see we've had Busi join us. Busi, would you mind just introducing yourself? It's such a small group. Just let us know who you are, which organization you're from, and where the organization is based.
Hi, good afternoon, colleagues. I'm Bosinkosi from the Africa Health Research Institute. I'm sort of been part of the meeting, and then there was some clashes and stuff that, clashed with the meeting, but it's good to be back.
Welcome
you.
back.
Yeah.
Welcome back.
Oh,
Busi.
I'm a social science researcher. So,
Excellent. Thank you. All right. Does anybody have any questions for Marlies about this story, the Johnson & Johnson, Aspen, the exports to Europe, or is everything clear? All right, Marlies, I think you might have
Hi,
been...
Maaza.
Oh, yes.
Maaza, it's Marcia.
Yes.
I'm going to ask a question, and I have a lot to understand, but I think my question is more about accountability. Is there, who holds Johnson & Johnson accountable? Is there a place that we can turn to, that we can question, that we could look to? Where do we go first when we look at such matters?
But yeah, that's a really good question. And I think one of the big criticisms of the amount of power that pharmaceutical companies hold is that they're not really accountable to anyone except their shareholders. So the fact that the shareholders released a statement, I think is useful. And I think that in terms of democratic processes, what is really worrying is that these contracts are being our governments, the people that we elect and that we can keep accountable through our parliament and democratic means, they are forging contracts with pharmaceuticals with so much power that they can enforce non-disclosure agreements. So if we put collective pressure on the parties that hold the contracts with Johnson & Johnson, so that's our own governments, especially powerful collectives like the African Union and the EU, if they insist on making those contracts transparent, and even more important, denounce or rejecting non-disclosure agreements, that will help with transparency. But the power of corporates within the vaccine crisis, I think, is particularly key. And one of the issues that you might think about in the week of action is how to reach shareholders and to note their ethical obligation to note these issues and to put that they are indirectly responsible for some of the actions of the pharmaceutical companies, and that they can bring pressure to bear to ensure more ethical conduct.
Thank you, Marlies. And one question that comes to mind as a follow-up to Marcia's is the accountability of a group like Aspen. I saw that there was a lot of social media chatter about that. You know, does Aspen have a responsibility here as well? And I know that some people have said that, look, you know, Aspen is sort of the small fish in this story. Johnson & Johnson is sort of the giant whale, and, you know, Aspen didn't have really that much ability to negotiate a better contract. Is that your stance as well as Health Justice Initiative, that our focus should really be Johnson & Johnson and then, you know, the government and maybe the powerful structures like African Union, and that Aspen and other companies like Aspen should be let off the hook this time around? What do you think?
So I think you're right. Aspen is a smaller fish, but the ethical obligations, I think, are the same. I think with Johnson & Johnson, it's important to target them, but it might be useful to start with a smaller company like Aspen, and that might have stronger ties to the African continent, to South Africa, and who might be more receptive to those arguments. So we certainly shouldn't be ignoring Aspen, and I think your comments are well taken.
Okay, great. Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, and I see Yoro has just joined us. Yoro, can you just introduce yourself, please? Let us know who you are, which organization you're from, and where your organization is based. Oh, and I see Lois is here as well. Welcome, Lois. You as well, maybe after Yoro, if you could just introduce yourself.
Hi, I am Yoro Cham. I am joining from Action AID International, the Gambia, and we are based off in Gambia.
Welcome, Lois. I think many people here know you, but please introduce yourself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lois. I'm really excited to join this meeting. Thank you.
And Lois is from Frontline Aid.
Frontline Aid, Director of Evidence and Influence. Thanks. Sorry, Maaza.
Thank you. That's okay. Thank you. So I see that Robert has a question, and just Lois and Yoro, for your benefit, just because Marlies, our comrade from Health Justice Initiative, is not going to be able to stay with us for the entire meeting, we decided to just start with her. Marlies was giving us the background on the Johnson & Johnson story, the export of Johnson & Johnson vaccines filled and finished at Aspen in South Africa to Europe. So what kind of potential advocacy follow-up is, and also just giving people the background who didn't have all the details of the story. Robert, I see you have a question.
Yeah, sure. Thanks a lot, Maaza, and really excellent presentation in terms of just trying to get this information out there. But for me, one of the things that sort of stood out is the counter narrative that's, pushing Aspen as just a finisher of the product and really deflecting from the real question, which is vaccines are leaving the continent. And the interesting thing is that we're actually trying to figure out how many doses have been donated to the continent against how much is going out. And if you look at that statistic, you realize that on the whole, it looks like Africa is actually supplying more than it is receiving from donations and stuff like that. So it would be an interesting sort of counter narrative to start pushing, whereas if these 10 million vaccine doses would have stayed on the continent, then we wouldn't need those donations, as it were. And for me, I think that sort of starts talking to where do we strengthen the agency of the African continent in these conversations, and sort of kill this deflective narratives that start saying, oh no, the Aspen is just finishing the product and it's really not doing the manufacturing. So just to be cautious and wary of some of that narrative. Thanks. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you, Robert. And that's a good point. I'd be curious to hear what other people think. Some of the feedback that I've gotten from the policy people at People's Vaccine Alliance is that, yes, of course, we're happy that groups like Aspen, and there are a few other companies across the continent, have been giving these contracts to fill and finish. But we worry that they're being touted as manufacturing capability being provided to African companies when the policy people feel like really the know-how and the IP rights have not been transferred. So let's, celebrate the win in that there's part of the process that is now happening on the African continent, but let's just remind people that the entire know-how of how to make the vaccines, which is required, and of course the IP rights, which we have been fighting for since the beginning with the discussions of the TRIPS waiver, that has not happened yet. So I'd be curious, for those of you who work quite a bit on this, Marlies, I don't know if Health Justice Initiative has a stance on this. I know that you all have been doing a lot around the TRIPS waiver and IP rights and manufacturing capability being transferred to Africa. Do you feel that saying it's just fill and finish, it's sort of is kind of taking responsibility away and maybe not addressing which of those two options do you think would be better? Highlighting that this is really just fill and finish and we want more, or celebrating the fill and finish and taking responsibility for the work that we are doing on the continent?
Well, I think it's a tough one. I do think the details of fill and finish need to be unpacked and understood, because it's often such a glib response to manufacturing in Africa, saying these two companies in South Africa who are manufacturing vaccines, when we know that it's only fill and finish and that the active ingredients are coming from Europe, and that these companies do not have the capacity, can build the capacity to make these what is called APIs, active pharmaceutical ingredients, but that they cannot do so because they don't have the technical know-how that needs to be transferred. So absolutely, this knowledge needs to be transferred, and that would capacitate some parts of Africa to produce the vaccines, and that could be expanded dramatically in a scale up to make sure that Africa is not dependent for 99% of its vaccines from other countries. I would like to note that the HAI recently released an explainer on vaccine licenses, and specifically the fill and finish. So what I'm going to do is when I send you a couple of links, I'm going to send you the link to this pamphlet that provides some input on fill and finish to understand the technical components. And at the end of it, it specifically talks about the importance of the TRIPS waiver and how important it is to support the TRIPS waiver to unlock manufacturing capacity in Africa and elsewhere. And that the TRIPS waiver needs to form a refrain in our demands as advocacy organizations.
Absolutely. And we'll talk a little bit more about that. But I think unless anybody has any burning questions for Marlies, then we can continue with the rest of the meeting, and we'll be coming back to the TRIPS waiver. Does anybody have any burning questions for Marlies? Please feel free to jump in or raise your hand.
Hi, Maaza.
Yes, Buba, please go ahead.
Yeah. Marlies, thanks so much for that. Just writing on the question earlier on accountability. What do you think this group could come up with? What would you recommend as a way forward? Because that's why we are set up. We need to be able to do something, to show our concern, to show that, things are the right way, so that we can be, we need to be able to do something. What would you recommend if there is one or two things?
I think the focus rightly is accountability and transparency, and I think we can add our voices to some of the broader campaigns, like the MSF Access campaign, of course, the Global People Vaccine Initiative, Free the Vaccine, where transparency and accountability have been core building blocks of the asks around vaccine equity. I think the African chapter is well placed to put pressure on our domestic governments if they have contracts with pharmaceutical companies. So, for example, in South Africa, where we've used our access to information legislation to push government to make these contracts available. So we can encourage countries domestically to release those contract details, but also importantly that we push some of the collectives like COVAX, like the AU, like AVAT, and say it is in the benefit, it's to the benefit of the people on the African continent to have these contracts free. And I don't think I've seen any calls, especially on the African Union and AVAT, to be transparent in their negotiations around the provision of vaccines. And I think this campaign is well placed to be asking these difficult questions and to say, this information needs to be available. Why are you not making it available?
Thank you very much, Marlies. And, I think this is a theme that we keep coming back to over and over. Much of the advocacy work of the People's Vaccine Alliance is rightly targeted at the governments of the global north, and we're going to be talking quite a bit about Germany and the US today as two targets of the upcoming People's Vaccine Alliance Week of Action. But I know that many of the people in this group, Lois, as you've also brought this up with me and others, have said, how do we also target the leaders on our continent, and kind of trying to figure out the balance between focusing on the decision makers at global level and also pushing for transparency and kind of more accountability from our governments as well, and the other leaders on the continent, such as the African Union. So Marlies, thank you so much. I know that you will need to sneak off at some point, so feel free to sneak off whenever you need to, and I will expect those links from you, and I'll make sure that I share them with the group, and there will also be a full transcript, and as usual, we'll be doing a very short summary report of the proceedings today. But Marlies, thank you so much, and we'll just carry on, and feel free to sneak off. So everyone, we will now, I'm going to try and share my screen, and Viv, you'll have to help me again. I know that there was an issue with my screen sharing. Can people see my screen?
Yes, Maaza, we can. If you could just do presenter view, thanks.
Great. All right. So I'm glad that we've had a few other people join us. Viv, just let me know if an issue comes up with my screen. I have a new kind of odd setup today. So I'll just do a very brief sort of summary intro of the People's Vaccine Alliance for the people who are joining us for the first time. We normally do have detailed sort of breakdown of vaccine rollout on the continent, where the vaccines are coming from, which vaccines they are. Our colleagues at Oxfam in Kenya have been great about putting that together, but I will probably be getting those at the end of the day. So I'll make sure that I'll share those with people when I get them. But I thought it would be important just to at least share this with you that I got from Our World in Data here, showing that, as somebody has already pointed out, in terms of people fully vaccinated, Africa 2.7% versus the world 26.6%, the US at 51.4%, and Germany at 59.7%. And the reason that I'm focusing on Germany and the US here, and by the way, for those of you who have not gone onto this website, Our World in Data, I highly recommend it. You can sort of get the graphs to show you, you can pick which countries you want, which regions you want, and the data is updated on a daily basis. So what our colleagues at Oxfam do when they compile their data is they take Our World in Data plus every other source that is available and try and do kind of overall cross-checked report for us. But this is just from Our World in Data. So if you have not accessed it yet, I highly recommend it. But this is always sort of a jarring chart when you see Africa down at the bottom versus the world versus Germany and the US, which are two of the countries making decisions for the rest of us. So what we had in mind today, hold on one second, for some reason there you go. So what we had in mind today was just a brief intro, which I'll do. And I wanted to jump into, normally we do a review of what has happened in the last month. It has been a pretty quiet month. As you know, many of the Europeans do take August off. So in terms of the People's Vaccine Alliance global activities, August has been pretty quiet, but I do want to hear from all of you. I know there are always activities going on the continent, and that's something that we want to make sure we share as well. But I wanted to jump in and talk about the upcoming week of action, because there really is an interest and a focus in making sure that the African civil society organizations join in the week of action, or maybe even kind of tweak the strategy of the People's Vaccine Alliance as well. So after that, we'll go into updates from you all, any burning issues, recent activities, points that we can get together on. I know that Amnesty International, last I had heard, and Flavia, I'm not sure if you're the point person on this, but Amnesty International, we had one of your other colleagues was with us last time, was talking about an upcoming SADC meeting. So I'd be curious to hear if any outcomes came from there. Gender links, I know there were a few things that you were working on. And then I wanted to just talk to you about upcoming key dates in addition to the week of action, that's something that the People's Vaccine Alliance has been quite good at, is kind of looking forward to see what are the upcoming opportunities for advocacy that we can pinpoint, and always looking for you all to add things as well that we might have missed. For example, last time I was reminded by one of the comrades here that World AIDS Day was not on the People's Vaccine Alliance advocacy, PVA calendar. And that's a day that we could potentially use for some advocacy, given the links between what's been happening with COVID-19 and what we saw with HIV medication back in the day. And any other business at the end, I did want to speak to the group about the date change and maybe shifting this meeting to Tuesday, the last Tuesday of the month, rather than the Thursday, just to avoid a clash with the PVA Global. So for those of you who are new, I'll go through this very, very quickly, but the slides will be shared. The People's Vaccine Alliance is not an organization. It's a coalition of over 75 organizations and networks with support from many influential people around the world. And the goal is really to fight to end vaccine apartheid. We are campaigning for a people's vaccine, so one that's freely available to everyone everywhere, and where the knowledge is also available to everyone everywhere. In terms of the demands, raising the ambition to vaccinate 60% of the planet. Intellectual property, we come back to over and over as a key issue. So that's where pushing the TRIPS waiver comes in, providing COVID-19 vaccine treatments and tests free of charge, making a large investment of public money into manufacturing and more doses around the world. So there, again, talking about the know-how that Marlies mentioned, and scaling up global financial support systems for upgrading and expanding public health systems, because we know that that is something that we will also have to deal with going forward, is that our health systems are struggling around the continent. Just to give you a sense of how the People's Vaccine Alliance is set up, there is a very small steering group, but then there are lots of, I guess I wouldn't say lots, there are several active working groups. And those of you who are on the working groups, I would encourage you to chime in terms of how that has been for you. And I just wanted to point out that this monthly meeting is very informal. You do not need to be a member of the People's Vaccine Alliance to join this African monthly meeting. But if you would like to join the People's Vaccine Alliance, I know that there's a lot of interest in making sure that there are more voices and organizations from the Global South and Africa in particular joining the People's Vaccine Alliance. So please let me know if you're interested in joining. This just gives you a sense of how the People's Vaccine Alliance works. There are several groups: the Campaigns and Media Group, Policy Advocacy, and then the Influentials Group reaches out to people who could potentially write op-eds, hold meetings, sort of influence at a higher level, influencing government and other leaders. And I know that, for example, Christian Aid, Robert, your colleagues were really essential in making sure that that statement came out from the Pope, the statement came out from the Dalai Lama. So those kind of things, also getting government leaders and others targeted to write op-eds. There was a letter that had gone out to the US president a few months ago, right before the US government agreed to support the TRIPS waiver. That was signed by a whole bunch of Nobel laureates and former heads of state. So that's what the Influentials Group really works on. And then within these groups, there are subgroups as well. So that's just to give you an idea of how the People's Vaccine Alliance works. In terms of strategic priorities now, pushing Germany. Germany is really at this point the key blocker and the most powerful blocker in the European Union to the TRIPS waiver. And the reason why Germany is particularly important is that there's an election coming up, and the People's Vaccine Alliance sees this as an opportunity to influence the person who will potentially be the new Chancellor of Germany. Angela Merkel is on her way out. She has been vocally opposed to sharing IP rights, which is disappointing because she has been quite liberal and open-minded about lots of other things. But given that BioNTech is based in Germany, she's apparently receiving quite a bit of pressure from the private sector in Germany. She is a scientist herself, she's a chemist by training, so she uses that as part of her advocacy to say that she knows what she's talking about, trust her, this is not a good idea. So we are really working very hard to push Germany. There's also a really big effort to amplify voices from the Global South. And this is really about the cost of inaction. There is a sense that people are not focused on the human toll of this pandemic at the moment, especially as the North Americans and the Europeans received their vaccinations. Things were improving. Now with the Delta variant, there is sort of a sense that a recognition that the scientists were right in telling us that if we did not vaccinate everyone, that there would be variants that would render the vaccines less effective. But still, there is a sense that the human toll, especially in Africa, is not being recognized. So there is really an effort to make sure that those voices are amplified. And also this question that Marlies mentioned about the readiness to manufacture. There was a lot of racist rhetoric a few months ago, and still is, about the fact that people in the global South, companies in the global South, cannot manufacture vaccines. We know that to be completely false. So there's also a lot about trying to increase voices around that and the readiness to manufacture, and then shaming pharmaceutical companies. There's been quite a bit that has come out about the fact that 9 pharmaceutical CEOs have become billionaires due to the COVID, or, along with the COVID-19 pandemic. They are really lobbying very hard against the TRIPS waiver. So there's quite a bit that we're doing in terms of trying to increase the heat on them. And then also amplifying, the work of others and identifying key opportunities is on the radar for the People's Vaccine Alliance. So before I jump into the week of action, does anybody have any questions or comments? Those of you who are in any of these working groups, do you have anything that you'd like to add about how that process has been for you at the People's Vaccine Alliance? And I can't see hands now, so if anybody needs to talk, please feel free to jump in. Okay, if not, we'll just keep going forward. So as I mentioned, there is, so this is something for those of you who are new, you might not be aware that the People's Vaccine Alliance tends to, as advocacy opportunities come up, focus on specific days. There have been days of action, and then now a week of action coming up soon in 2 weeks. So the aim is really here to shame leaders into action by focusing on the human cost of the pandemic. There is a statistic that WHO put out about 10,000 people dying per day at the moment from COVID-19. And here is the message, that we have the vaccines, we have what we call the recipes, the technology, the manufacturing capacity, but people are still dying because the wrong choices are being made. And here I should rephrase this. We seem to not have the political will, right? So we have the ability, but we do not have the political will. And Biden and Merkel are being targeted, and that's the choice that has been made by the People's Vaccine Alliance at global level to target Biden and Merkel. Merkel because of the issues that I've already mentioned, and Biden because he supported, or his administration supported, the TRIPS waiver a few months ago. I think most of us have seen the press around that. I think it was in, I want to say March or April, came out in support of the TRIPS waiver, but has otherwise been very quiet, has not done much to kind of push that any further. There's been a lot of talk from the US about the 500 million vaccine doses that will be provided to Africa. But from what I understand, many of those doses have actually not appeared. And, unfortunately, MSF is not here today, but the rest of you who might have information about that at your fingertips, please feel free to chime in. But what I'm told is that during the G7 meeting, there was a lot of hype around Joe Biden saying that the US administration was going to donate a whole bunch of vaccines to Africa, but very few of those have actually turned up. So Biden and Merkel, the US government and the German government, are being targeted for this week of action. So the core targets, September 14th in particular, is really about stop blocking the TRIPS waiver and also sharing vaccine technology. And then on the 20th, you'll see here is apparently Moderna in particular has been really, really hesitant to share any information, and really encouraging the issue with Moderna. And as you know, I think Pfizer did not receive as much money from the US government, but Moderna, has taken all of the profit and had very little of the risk. They were fully supported by the US government in terms of their the process of building this COVID-19 vaccine. So really encouraging Biden to show more leadership in supporting the TRIPS waiver. So these companies here, BioNTech, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, and AstraZeneca, are being targeted by the People's Vaccine Alliance. There is a big protest taking place this coming weekend in Germany. It's called Make Them Sign. So this is just to show you, what they hope will happen in Germany, billboards along the protest route. So that's coming up very soon. That's just for your information. There is an MSF office in Germany, and they have been quite active in supporting the People's Vaccine Alliance with that. So in terms of media products that People's Vaccine is hoping will come out, There is, as I mentioned, there's always been an interest in letters from heads of states and Nobel laureates and others being drafted by the influentials team. So here the idea is to have those letters targeted to the 3 parties that are running for the upcoming German election. So those are the 3 parties listed there: the Green Party, the Christian Democrats, and I forget off the top of my head what SPD is. They're candidates to be the next chancellor of Germany, basically. So targeting them with information about vaccine apartheid and what the activist asks are. That letter will be shared in English and German. Then here, the idea is to have interviews of spokespeople by German media in key countries. So here I put Ghana, Namibia, and Uganda in red because we were told by the People's Vaccine Alliance that those are countries where there is quite a presence of German media. So I wanted to brainstorm with you all. We could either do it here or offline. You could send me an email if you feel that there are good spokespeople in those countries that could speak to these issues. Something that those of you who are PVA members are aware of is that we have been developing with colleagues, with the global coordinator and others, a list of potential spokespeople and storytellers from the Global South for the People's Vaccine Alliance. Many of you have contributed names. Thank you so much for that. We have many names from Uganda, a few names from Namibia, but at the moment, none from Ghana. So this is something that we need to beef up, but that's just something to keep in mind. And then there will be 24 hours of basically press, hopefully, and this is something that I wanted to ask you all about as well. There's going to be a section later about actions that are offline. So people actually going to German embassies, protesting, that sort of thing, if there's appetite for that on the African continent this time around. There are some, what the People's Vaccine Alliance calls killer facts. So things really juxtaposing what's happening in the global north to what's happening in the global south. So those will be given to German media, and then organizing talks with German politicians. So really kind of trying to focus on Germany. And I'll race through this very quickly, but there are a couple of films being developed. There's what you see down here below is a German influencer that went viral that they're hoping to get to use to do something about the TRIPS waiver. So in terms of online actions, I'll share this with you, but there is a People's Vaccine Alliance social media kit. And for those of you who don't follow the People's Vaccine, I highly recommend it. There are a lot of interesting articles whenever something happens in terms of advocacy asks. So they're shared on their Twitter feed. And then here, just some other kind of potential online actions, the videos that will be shared, and also a Twitter bot that the People's Vaccine Alliance is hoping to set up. This is really what I wanted to get your feedback about too. So one thing was the spokespeople in Namibia, Uganda, and Ghana. If there are people that we can pinpoint there that would be ready to speak to German media in September. But then there's also an appetite for some offline actions, and we haven't had too many of those. MSF, Section 27 Health Justice Initiative has done in-person actions at pharmaceutical companies in South Africa, at a couple of embassies as well. But there is a question for us from the People's Vaccine Alliance Global: do African civil society organizations want to do something on the ground during this week of action, whether it's a protest or a sit-in or anything like that? So I just wanted to check with you on that. The proposed actions are showcasing the 10,000 deaths per day. So is there a way to showcase that? There is a potential photo opportunity. There's a group called the People's Assembly, where they have been meeting in a variety of countries and gathering stories from marginalized people. So that is something that is being coordinated from the PVA Global with this group called the People's Assembly, which I actually don't know too much about, so I'd need to follow up on. And then, this is, if I can, and Viv, let me know if this turns up. This is something, for example, that was suggested to us. Can people see this, the reflection on this tree here? So that's, the kind of idea, like if people are worried about going out in person and protesting at embassies for issues of security or other, there is a little bit of money from the People's Vaccine Alliance available at the moment for these types of actions. So if you wanted to, reflect a statement or, have a giant banner or something, in a place that wouldn't get people in trouble, so whether it's a German embassy in an African city, whether it's a Goethe Institute, something that's affiliated with Germany. So that's just something to keep in mind. Let's see. Sorry, I am running through these very quickly. Then on September 20th is going to be a focus on now Biden and the US. So that is, the UN General Assembly is taking place that week in New York, even though I hear recently that there has been a push to not have people travel because of COVID and the Delta variant. But those people who are already in the US are planning a protest, and let's see if this works here. These are the colleagues at Health Gap who are organizing a Biden End Vaccine Apartheid March on September 20th. So again, I've been asked, do the civil society organizations in Africa have an interest in also organizing some kind of march as well, targeting either Germany or the US? So that is a question. And then anything that we can do, if offline, in person is really problematic, what can we do online? Sharing photos of people who have died from COVID online, any other social media assets that we can make up. I know there's some very creative groups around the continent, cartoons, comics, anything that can really bring that African perspective, or if there are influencers in Africa that could develop messages. There is at the moment, the People's Vaccine Alliance is fundraising, but there is limited money, but there are small funds available for actions. We are working on a film, which we hope will be ready by September 20th. And that's really highlighting human stories. And as I said, there has been an effort to really highlight the toll of the COVID-19 pandemic in Africa. So there's one video that a filmmaker is working on, highlighting stories from the continent. And there's also some interest in doing a creative product that focuses on the links between HIV and COVID. So I'll keep you posted on that. But that's it for now. Before I go into other dates, I'm just going to stop sharing. And I just wanted to talk about, what we've just discussed now in terms of the week of action. Do people have any thoughts? Is there enthusiasm? Is this something that you think African civil society organizations could join in on? Does anybody have any comments, questions, concerns? And I actually see that we've had one new person, Ruth. Ruth, could you please introduce yourself and tell us which organization you're from and where the organization is based, please?
Hi, everyone. My name is Ruth Oboya. I'm Action AID and I'm based in Nairobi. Thanks.
Thank you. And Action AID is one of the most vocal, motivated. They are always around for People's Vaccine Alliance activities, whether online or offline. So we really appreciate you. Thank you so much, Ruth.
Thank you, Maaza.
Yes.
Yes, an idea from Action AID is collating what we call people's heroes. Because we know that in these difficult times, there are survivors, there are people who had to struggle to eke out a living, and we need to celebrate those. So we're coming up with this concept to try to get those voices documented, and we will use that in our advocacy or campaigning during the week of actions. And in your reaction to the question that I asked, Marcel, on the need for us to focus attention back home, to talk to our governments or the African Union or regional blocs, I think it's also timely because they also need to be held accountable. So in any one ways that we can do that, I think that need to be encouraged also, because there are platforms that we can ride on to be able to do this. That is the upcoming GMAC Summit, the Gender is My Agenda Coalition. We can plug into that agenda to ensure that the voices around these people's vaccines work is also brought to that level, so that our leadership would also know that we are also on their back on these strict waiver issues, but yeah, still we want them to be more accountable to the citizens on certain things that they are doing, especially relating to the Johnson & Johnson company and other things related to that. We've also been hearing about a lot of corruption around these COVID funds, from within this region. Many a time they collect these funds, either loans or debt or whatever, but the proper utilization of that is questionable, and we need to take them to account. I think these and many other things we can be able to bring to the fore and ask our leaders to bear, bring them to account, and then let them know that we are supporting them when it's positive. But any negativity, any corruption or malpractices or mismanagement of funds will not be tolerated. I think that voice needs to be echoed. Thank you.
Okay. And Buba, you're making me think, a few months ago for a previous day of action, many of you who were already in this group with us had signed on to a letter that we had written as African civil society to European leaders, and specifically European leaders who were former colonial powers in Africa. And if you haven't seen that letter, I can share it around again, but it was calling them out. This was when they were at that time, France was also still blocking the TRIPS waiver. France has now decided to support it, even though very mildly. But we were calling out France, the UK, Italy, and Germany for their blocking the TRIPS waiver and their very kind of colonial narrative about, you can't even manufacture vaccines, trust us, we'll give you our leftovers, everything will be fine. So we had written that letter and got quite a few signatures and got a little bit of traction. I wonder, Buba, if the group thinks that it would be worth African civil society writing a letter now to our leaders as well and saying, we wrote one to the European leaders, and now we're without maybe pinpointing specific presidents or prime ministers, writing a letter to African leaders. Do people think that would be of interest?
I think it will. An open letter would do. We can and have it there on the social media, and I think it will be awesome if we can do it.
Okay, so I'll put that on the list, and we can maybe talk about this when we go to the kind of upcoming advocacy opportunities. But just in terms of now this week of action, where we are highlighting stories from the global South and really trying to target Germany and the US and focusing on issues of IP and TRIPS waiver. Buba, I'm very interested to hear about this People's Heroes, because as you know, and actually if one of the people from Action Aid could join, there is a storytelling group at the People's Vaccine Alliance now, which is a working group from the campaigns and media group, because there was so much interest in developing stories and sharing stories. So that's where the films are coming out of. The film that I mentioned is coming out of that storytelling group. Buba, could you ask you yourself, or could anybody from Action Aid join that storytelling group and just keep people updated on what is going on there with this People's Heroes?
Yeah, I wouldn't mind doing that. I would also talk to colleagues in the leadership to see who will be better placed, because I could represent the region in this, I guess, and I'll report back to them. So,
okay.
Yeah,
that would be great. I'll send you the invite. The next meeting will be on Thursday, and I think it's not going to be a sort of a group that will go on forever. It's sort of a short working group that's a break off of the campaigns and media to try and gather some of these stories, whether it's videos or other stories. So thank you, Buba. Does anybody else have any concerns or questions, or think that there would be an interest I'm particularly curious about one, we have this issue with spokespeople in Uganda, Ghana, and Namibia specifically for that day of targeting Germany, but also the question of potentially having offline action, in-person protests during the week of action. Is there any interest in that? And the reason I ask is because, the last few times we've had days of action or weeks of action, as I said, Section 27, Treatment Action Campaign, Health Justice Initiative did manage to get a small group to go, I believe, to some pharmaceutical companies. And there was also one group that I think went to an embassy, but the kind of interest and appetite, and if you think that, look, these types of things, in Nairobi, Banjul, Dakar, Johannesburg, they just don't really work, and we'd rather do online. I think we can also honestly say that, I think there's a different type of protesting appetite, different relationships with law enforcement, et cetera, in other countries. So I'm happy to give that feedback. But I just wanted to hear your thoughts. It seems to me that since people are not chiming in, there's really not that much interest in doing in-person protests. Lois, I see you've unmuted yourself. Are you going to bring back the old protests from back in the day?
Yeah, I wish we could, but I think in most of these countries, because of the COVID regulations, it might be difficult. What I was going to suggest is we could deliver letters to the different embassies on that day in as many countries in Africa as we can possibly do. If we could do letters that we deliver at the same time that our colleagues overseas are demonstrating, so that it's all synchronized.
Okay, I like that idea. And this is a letter really saying, you know, from us as African civil society, this is a letter to it would be the German embassy or the US embassy. And I think, you know, the focus on Germany, maybe if we could actually get, since that letter for the potential new chancellors will be, I think they're already starting to draft it. Maybe I could ask them for some language that we could then adapt and have letters from African civil society to German embassies around the continent. I see a thumbs up from Busi. What do other people think? Is that something that we could try to explore? And do you think we'd get signatures from all of your organizations?
Maybe I can just jump in quickly. I was just going to say that I would reach out to one of our partners who's really big on assembling and pulling out stunts and stuff like that, just to see if they might be interested in projecting something on the, you know, Goethe Institute or, you know, German embassy. But I also think, given the current restrictions, we just need to be creative on how we do this offline engagement. So I'll get in touch, and then I'll report back to this group even before our next meeting.
Okay, thank you so much. That would be great. And then I think, you know, we can try and think creatively about the online actions as well. You know, I think, Buba, with this People's Heroes, if there's a way to kind of share those during that week of action on social media and get traction on social media, that would be great. There has been some talk about, you know, sharing photos of people who have passed away. And I know that's a lot to ask people to share photos of their loved ones, but there is this sense that, you know, people are dying in such large numbers without their names being recognized, or the fact that, you know, I mean, I think that somebody had done, and it might have been the Killer Facts, you know, the number of people who have died in Africa since the first vaccine started being rolled out, you know, in the UK, and maybe just kind of highlighting the losses. Do you think that there would be, and I don't know how we would do that, you know, if we'd ask people to share photos, maybe the name, you know, when the person died and their age, and then have kind of on the days of action, some kind of rolling memorial or something like that. Would there be interest, or do you think people would hesitate to share photos of their deceased loved ones? Since there's no response, I'm guessing let me put somebody on the spot here. Ntando, I always put you on the spot because I know you so well. What do you think? Do you think that's a lot to ask people to share photos of their deceased loved ones and share them on social media for one of these days of action, kind of trying to shame people? And, you know, the concern is, and this partially came from People's Vaccine Alliance leadership as well. You know, here we have, and I've told Lois the story, how Winnie Byanyima, who's the director of UNAIDS and is one of the people of the leadership of the People's Vaccine Alliance, actually shut off her camera, you know, in annoyance during one meeting when people were talking about new members to the PVA and new funders. And she said, you know, you people are not being serious. My friend buried her son and her mom on the same day, and you all are talking about new members. I want us to kind of recognize the toll that this is taking on people. So there is an interest in that, but if it's not an interest among, you know, the civil society on the ground, then we'll have to give that feedback to the PVA. But Ntando, I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think about that, sharing faces and names of the deceased?
No, Mandra, I mean, I think it's as effective as our mobilization from all our respective places where we are, and how we do that mobilization, and we really have people who who really understand the cause, I think we can then have people do that. But I think beyond that, and probably I'm thinking that's where a lot of the pauses you're hearing on the group is just how heavy this whole thing is, and how huge the system that we're really working against, and I think that really presents quite a lot of things to really think seriously about, and it makes all the protests, be it it's the old style that seems not as effective anymore, and which then really requires all of the other approaches that go online to really make a point and make a stand. So I think those are really the things that are key as consideration for all of the action. But I think, however, I do think and know that anything is possible.
Okay, thank you, Ntando. And I think, and Busi, I see your hand, but I just want to say that, I think the hope is that by sharing some of the stories of the human suffering or the toll of the pandemic on people on the continent, and I know that we're in two minds about this. I have colleagues who say, look, if understanding the suffering would change people's minds, we wouldn't be in the situation we're in now, right? But I think the sense is that, as I mentioned to Marlies earlier, if seeing these stories of vaccines being sent to Europe from South Africa when there is a third wave wakes up the Johnson & Johnson shareholders and has them asking questions like, wait, you're making us look bad. Is this something that, if those stories were shared in a respectful way, would the European citizens be more likely to push their leaders? That I think is the hope. But obviously we want to do everything in a way that doesn't add, kind of more of a toll to people as well. I see Lois, I see your hand, but I think Busi's hand was up first. Busi, you took your hand down. Do you still have anything to say?
Yes, I'll be brief, and it was to support the idea that it's worth exploring, dealing with the COVID-19, putting people's faces, putting the human face instead of the statistics is much more impactful. And I think you just set out the context and the purpose for this. So yeah, in short, I support the idea that it's worth exploring.
Okay, thank you, Busi. Lois?
I was going to support that idea very much. And I think a lot of people would want to put pictures of their loved ones or mentor or anything that talks to that person. In a way, it is a way of dealing with grief, which in this context, people are struggling to find mechanisms of dealing with the grief. I was going to suggest that if people provided those photos, would PVA, would the Global Alliance, would they be able to create like a photo board?
I think so.
That just keeps, something that just keeps going and keeps growing and growing. And then we can work with that, whether we want to put that into flags, whether we want to create it into different things, drawing from that photo board. I would think it would really, really have an impact. I'm reminded, I always go back to HIV. With HIV, it was a quilt. If some of you remember, we did a global quilt that kept going from country to country to country to country. And, people sewing this huge, massive quilt. And we have technology now. We could do a photo board that is a global photo board, and it just keeps going, and each country just builds their own photo board.
Yeah, I like that idea, Lois. And I know that, the People's Vaccine Alliance, they have at the moment 2 staff members. One is the coordinator and the second is the social media person, and she's quite savvy. And I think, the idea of having that board And with just, the country, the person's name, age, maybe we could decide, what we want to put, like maybe in one line, how this person is being remembered, and then have it growing and growing would actually be really, that's a nice idea, Lois. So I'll run this by them, but then I would really be then also counting on you all to reach out to people in your networks, if they were willing to share, we would let you know, okay, for each photo, these are the 4 things that we need, and then we could build that board. So I will keep you posted on that. And let me just see if there are any other hands. I don't see any other hands. So the follow-up points here are, Buba, I will see if I'll send you the invite to the meeting for the stories. I think it'd be great to hear about this People's Heroes and have that be integrated into the People's Vaccine Alliance storytelling, and see if that's something that can also be used, in time for this Germany or US targeting day. We'll follow up on the idea of having letters delivered to embassies in as many African countries as possible. And I'll see if I can get the draft of the letter that's being targeted to the leaders and see if we can use some of that language and run it by the group. Robert, you will get back to us about your colleagues who can maybe develop some sort of stunt, at least in one place, so we can have an on-the-ground stunt. And I think that's it. Oh, does anybody, and you can tell me this offline, please think about it. As I mentioned, there's apparently quite a bit of German press in Namibia, Ghana, and Uganda. And I know, especially Action AID, you all have people all over the continent, frontline aides. I don't know if you do as well, Lois, but if you have colleagues or collaborators or colleagues or comrades who you think can speak, without too much preparation. One thing I wanted to say is that, the spokesperson list that we're developing for the People's Vaccine Alliance, there has been a commitment to try and give people on that list capacity building if they would like it. There's often quite a bit of nervousness, media requests come in with a day's notice and they'll say, Sky News wants to speak to somebody today, who's ready? And people get a bit nervous about that. So Oxfam has offered to do a little bit of capacity building on key talking points and how to deal with live TV. So that is available kind of in the medium term. But now for something that is happening right, in the next 2 weeks, please, you don't have to tell me now, but think about it. If you can send me names of people who in Uganda, Ghana, or Namibia, who you think would be available to speak to the German press, I think it would be very important to have African voices available on those days of targeting, that day of targeting Germany. So that's another ask as well. Please let me know that. Okay. All right, so I'm going to go back to sharing my screen. Viv, please tell me again if it is it visible?
Yes, it is.
Great, thank you. All right, so now I just wanted to talk about key upcoming dates. I already mentioned the Make Them Sign protest coming up in Germany on the 4th of September. There is the G20 Health Ministers meeting coming up in Rome shortly thereafter. I think South Africa might be the only African country in the G20. I don't know if anybody can correct me here. Does anybody have that information on their fingertips? Is South Africa the only African G20 country? I believe so. But I think given that is coming up very soon, I'm not sure that we could pull anything together for that. But I think what would be important is paying attention to any statements or declarations that come out of the G20 Health Ministers meeting. There is the UN General Assembly, and we've talked about that. So the 2 days of action for Germany and the US will be during that period of the UN General Assembly. The German elections are coming up on the 26th of September, and the hope there is really to have a new German leader that is willing to support the TRIPS waiver. I think it cannot be we cannot understate the impact that Angela Merkel has had on the other European leaders in making them stick to the party line. She was apparently the one who called the French president, who had initially said he would support the TRIPS waiver. He then changed his mind and flip-flopped. Germany is a very powerful country in the EU, so there's really a lot of interest in trying to impact them. The World Bank annual meetings are coming up in mid-October, and I think the reason why this has been highlighted is because of issues of financing and purchasing of vaccines. Then the G20 itself, so the first one is the health ministers meeting, but the larger G20 is coming up at the end of October. So again, if there are any potential advocacy opportunities, statements, any pushing of those leaders at the G20. The COP is the big climate change meeting, which had been scheduled to take place at the end of October. I've just seen yesterday that there is some talk of maybe postponing that because African and other global South civil society leaders did not have access to vaccines, and going to this large meeting in the UK then became a problem, especially because they needed to quarantine. But there has been, and that might be more in the global north. I don't know if we see this so much in Africa, but there has been an interest in advocating with the climate change people together, the links between climate change and COVID-19, the fact that there is the similarity between the two crises, that people in the global south are being ignored and left behind the same way it has been for climate change. So that's something that is on the radar. Buba, I know your colleagues in Asia. I was on a call with Dinah, and she had mentioned that in Asia, there was quite a bit of talk about the COP and the advocacy that civil society was doing around, the ridiculousness of asking people to travel when there are no vaccines and then forcing them to quarantine at their own cost. So November 6th is the 1-year anniversary of the launch of the ensemble, that's the Johnson & Johnson trial. I know Marlies has logged off, but I don't know if people in South Africa think that that would be a day worth doing some kind of action around. The irony of the fact that people in South Africa participated in this trial, put their bodies on the line, and now are in a situation where vaccines are very scarce a year later. So that's something that we could get on our radar. Of course, World AIDS Day, it's going to come up very quickly. Lois, I know Frontline AIDS is probably really interested in doing something about this in terms of linking the struggle for ARVs with the struggle for COVID-19 vaccines. So I think it would be interesting as African civil society to do something around World AIDS Day. And then, of course, December 8th is the 1-year anniversary of the first COVID-19 vaccine being administered in the UK. So if we do have that board of the photos of the deceased people, that might be something that we point out, the number of people who have died around the world since this vaccine started being administered and how many lives could have been saved if the rollout had been improved. Those are all the dates that I have. Buba, I feel like you mentioned a new date that we don't have. What was that date that you mentioned?
Is the Civil Society Consultative Forum before the African Union Summit. It's called the GMAC Conference. GMAC,
I'm sorry, your line is a bit choppy. Would you mind putting it in the chat, Buba, if you're on your computer? And then the African Union Summit is actually when? Is that in October?
Yeah, it's in October. It's in October. So prior to that, there is this GMAC conference. It's called the GMAC Civil Society Consultative Forum.
Okay.
So that happened. I'll reach out to you on the actual dates, and I'll communicate that to you.
So it seems like the African Union meeting is also a very important one that we need to make sure gets on the People's Vaccine Alliance calendar then, right? Because given all that we've talked about making sure our leaders are accountable as well, we should definitely do something for the African Union. Okay, great. Yeah. And then I've also have as a follow-up point, the idea of doing an open letter to African leaders. And that, I don't know if people think that the African Union meeting in October would be a good target date for that open letter. What do people think?
I'm in support of that.
Okay, any other, I'll stop sharing now, just so I can see the hands. Does Robert, yes, I see your hand up.
Yeah, sure. So just to say that I would support that open letter to the AU summit, and I think that GMAC might be important. But one date that hasn't come up is that 12th WTO ministerial conference. I think it's scheduled for the 30th of November to 3rd of December. And I think that's where they're going to have some of those discussions on IP rights. So that will definitely be a very key date if that meeting goes ahead. Thanks.
Okay, that's WTO Ministerial Conference, and you said that's in October.
November the
November.
30th, running all the way to 3rd December. I'm just going to share a link from their website right now. Yeah.
Please do. That would be great. Are there any other dates that we have missed? You know, so these dates that I've put here are just from the People's Vaccine Alliance calendar. As I said, World AIDS Day was one that was added, I think, thanks to Boane from Section 27, who reminded us of that last time. Any dates that are missing that we can flag to the People's Vaccine Alliance to keep on their radar? Already, the African Union Summit is key. And then this meeting that Robert is sharing, any other dates that we have missed that should be on the People's Vaccine Alliance calendar?
So, Maaza, we probably would want to look at the virtual, the hybrid CASA meeting that's happening beginning of December. And of course, so it's in Devon. For all those who will be attending in person, then the rest. I think it would be a good moment for anyone who is able to go there to really make a case in the statement.
Okay. And that coincides with World AIDS Day, right? The ICASA conference. Is it?
No, it's just a few days after.
It's just a few days after. Okay, great. Thank you. Any other dates that we've missed that people would like to point out? No. Okay. So we just have a few more minutes. I just have a little bit of kind of housekeeping to point out. I wanted to remind all of you that this monthly meeting is really informal. It's a time for us to chat and get updates and exchange updates and strategize. Anybody is welcome to join this meeting, you know, so please, and I apologize at the beginning for those of you who joined a few minutes late. I'm sorry about the spam that came through on the mass email. We're shifting these communications to MailChimp going forward. But if there are people who you think should be added to this list, please let me know. If you are on this list but would like to join the People's Vaccine Alliance more formally, please let me know. What that would mean is then you would have access to these working groups. You would also have access to quite a bit of information that the People's Vaccine Alliance sends out to its members, articles, data, what they call killer facts, etc. And then you would also be on the website of the People's Vaccine Alliance as a supporter. The People's Vaccine Alliance is in the process of fundraising now. For the moment, everything has been done on a shoestring. People have been doing the work in addition to their regular jobs. But the hope is that within the next 3 months, there will be some funding set aside for campaigns and other activities related to People's Vaccine Alliance work. So groups that are in that network would also, I think, have more of an opportunity to receive funding for those types of activities. So if you would like to join the People's Vaccine Alliance, please feel free to email me. We do have a WhatsApp group that is quite informal as well, which has been pretty quiet recently. So I think I need to start sending more articles and other things on that. But if you would like to join the PVA Africa WhatsApp group, please let me know. It's not a very spammy WhatsApp group. As I said, it's actually more quiet than noisy, but send me your number and I will add you to the WhatsApp group. Buba, I see you've unmuted yourself. Is there something that you wanted to add?
Yeah. I just wanted to give a more concrete date on the GMAC event. It's happening on the 11 and 12th October.
Okay, so that's pretty soon.
Virtual ones. So the link will be provided. And as we talk with the organizers, if you want a slot to like the PVA Africa to make a presentation, I can negotiate for that so that we can bring that to that level, because it's necessary that we reach out to the African leadership, you know, in this way, in this manner. Yeah.
Okay.
So
great.
I'll talk with you on that. But you know, if there are more details for registration, I'll also share it out so that people can join. And I'll talk to the organizers also if the PVA Africa team would want to make a special presentation on our behalf. I think I can open doors to that also.
Thank you, Buba. That would be fantastic. One last thing, we just have a minute to go. As I said, we have experienced a clash with the PVA Global on Thursdays. So I'm proposing that we shift this meeting to the last Tuesday of the month if there are no major objections. I hope that will be okay. So that's what I will be proposing going forward. I will send out this presentation right now in blind copy to everyone. So you have the slides, the transcript, and the report. The very, very short report will be coming soon after with kind of follow-up action items. But unless anybody has anything to add, we're at the top of the hour, so we will wrap up. Any final burning statements from anyone before we close? No. Okay. Thank you so much for joining, everyone. I know the Zoom is exhausting, so we really appreciate you making the effort to join. And we hope to see you next month. And in the interim, we'll be in touch on email and elsewhere. And especially thank you to those of you who joined for the first time. It's always nice to see new faces. So wishing you a good week. Bye, everyone.
Bye, Maaza. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Maaza.
Bye, Maaza. Thank you very much. Have a
Bye,
nice rest of the week.
You
Bye.
too. Thank you. Bye-bye.